Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for joining today in our ongoing discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll resume our discussion from first canto, 10th chapter, verse 31. So we'll start as usual with our Mangalacharan prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naishtike Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunnavadi Pashatyadeshatarane. We had so I think Juta is managing the
Yes, Roji, I'll just give me a minute. I'll share my screen.
Okay. Okay, so while Achyuta is getting ready, we'll just go ahead with the verse. In the last discussion, we had concluded the prayers by the ladies of Hastinapur. And we had seen the mood as a combination of Aishwarya in Shanta Bhav and reflections of Madhurya also. So they had begun by glorifying Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then they had moved on to describe the glories of Krishna, his devotees, specifically his devotees in Dwarka. And then they were glorifying his wives, the queens of Krishna in Dwarka, and that was the last verse when they spoke about the sweet interactions between the queens of Dwarka and Krishna. Also talked about the gopis, and we had a little bit of discussion about that, and that was the end of the prayers. So we'll resume from 110:31. Evam vida gadanti nam sagira purayoshitam nirikshanen abhinandam samstitena Bhayahari. While the ladies of the capital, Hastinapur, were greeting him and talking in this way, the Lord smiled, accepted the good greetings, and casting the grace of his glance over them, he departed from the city. So Krishna accepts the prayers by the ladies by his glance, nirakshanena, and by his smile, smitena. And the acharyas say that for those ladies who were in Shantaras, he acknowledges their prayers with a glance. And for those who were in Shringaras, he acknowledges their prayers with a smile, which is more personal and he departs from the city. Okay, next verse, 110:32. So the next set of verses till 32 to 39 is basically an description of the exit of Krishna from Hastinapur, his travel to the point that he reaches Dwarka. And the next chapter is his entry into Dwarka. So 110:32. Ajata Shattu Pratnama Gopithaya Madhudvisha Parebhya Sankitaha Sneha Prayungta Chaturanginim. Maharaj Yudhishthir, although no one's enemy, engaged 4 divisions of defense, horse, elephant, chariot, and army, to accompany Lord Krishna, the enemy of the Asuras, demons. The Maharaj did this because of the enemy, but also out of affection for the Lord. So when Krishna was leaving, so he was leaving only with Satyaki and Uddhav in the chariot. But Sutta Goswami says that here Maharaj Yudhishthir engages four divisions of the army, and separately there is we won't go into that, but there's a little bit more description about, so much I just give about why these 4. In some cases, the horses are used when they're traveling through foresty areas. The elephants are used, but sufficient to say they were for his defense. And Sutta Goswami uses the name play over here. So he says Maharaj Yudhishthir is Ajata Shatru. He is one without any enemy, but he calls Krishna as Madhudvisha. Madhudvisha is one who is envious of the Madhu demon. So Krishna has enemies. Madhu was the head of the Asuras, the first Asura, Madhu and Kaitab. And so unlike Maharaj Yudhishthir, Krishna has Asuras as his enemy. So Maharaj Yudhishthir deployed these to protect him. Another understanding also is that Krishna is Madhudvisha, and Madhu is the greatest of the demon. So if Krishna has the ability to kill Madhu demon, then it is understandable that there is no other demon or no other force that can pose any threat to Krishna. So yet Maharaj Yudhishthir, he deploys these armies, but that is only out of affection. So this verse kind of makes the 2 points that were made in the initial discussion also, that why did Krishna accept this protection offered by Yudhishthir? So the first reason he accepted is because of the apparent relationship, that Maharaj Yudhishthir is the emperor of the world, and he's the king. He's an elder cousin of Krishna. So out of deference to the emperor, to his older cousin, Krishna accepts this protection. And the second reason is Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is happy to become subservient to his devotees. So when Yashoda Mai tries to protect Krishna, then Krishna jumps into her lap for protection. And when Nand Baba, he tries to protect Krishna, then Krishna tightly holds on to his fingers for protection. So that is the mood of Krishna. So when Maharaj Yudhishthir, in the mood of a devotee, is offering protection to Krishna, Krishna happily accepts it. Not because he needs it, but because he reciprocates to the love of his devotee. And this point will be again made in the 11th chapter. So it's one of Krishna's intrinsic quality. So we see that being made again and again in relationship to his devotees. Okay, next verse, 110:33. तथा दूरागतान् शौरी कौरवान् विरह आतुरान् सनिवर्त्यादृतं स्निग्धान् प्रायत् स्वानगरीं priyah. Out of profound affection for Lord Krishna, the Pandavas, who were of the Kuru dynasty, accompanied him a considerable distance to see him off. They were overwhelmed with the thought of future separation. The Lord, however, persuaded them to return home, and he proceeded towards Dwarka with his dear companions. So in this verse, Krishna is referred to as Shauri, and the name is derived from the meaning that he belongs to. So Krishna belongs to the dynasty of Shurasen. Vasudeva is the son of Shurasen, and Krishna is the son of Vasudeva. So the dynasty is Suri, Shauri, and Krishna is a part of that dynasty. That kingdom is also known as Shaurya Raj. It will get referred later on as Shaurya Raj because it belongs to the Shaurya dynasty. And then we see another demonstration of the loving exchange between Krishna and his devotees. So the Pandavas were of course aware that they will not be able to go with Krishna all the way to Dwarka, but they wanted to postpone that separation as much as possible. So then, just out of love for him, they accompanied him. And at least in India, this is not uncommon. That somebody comes to visit you, and then you go along with the person all the way till the station to leave the person. So even though only one person may be needed to drive, but the whole family will get onto the car, and they'll make sure the person is on the train. They'll say bye bye to the person, and then they'll come back. So factually speaking, it's just extending the association by maybe an hour or a few hours, but it's just sweet. It's just a representation of the love, where more than the quantity, the gesture is appreciated. So uh, here Sutta Goswami, he says that the main reason for the Pandavas to accompany Krishna was Vira Aturam. So Atur means disturbed, and Vira means separation. So they were disturbed by the impeding separation. And the second reason was Snigdhan, because of affection. And then Krishna persuades them to return, and then he proceeds to Swanagarim. So his own kingdom, Dwarka, Priya, along with his Priya. Priya in this case refers to Satyaki and Uddhav, two very, very close and intimate devotees of Krishna. Okay, next verse. Kuru Jangal Panchalan Shorasenan Sayamunan Brahmavartam Kurukshetram Matsyan Sarasvatanataha Marudanvam Atikramya Savirabhiryaha Paran Anarthan Bhargav Pajak Shrantavaho Manag Vibhu. O Shaunak, the Lord then proceeded towards Kuru Jangal, Panchal, Shorasena, the land on the bank of the river Yamuna. So this is essentially referring to Mathura Vrindavan, Shorasena. Brahmavat, Kurukshetra, Matsya, Saraswat, the province of the desert of the land of scanty water. So this is Rajasthan. After crossing these provinces, he gradually reached Shavira and Abhira provinces, and then west of these reached Dwarka at last. So again, we see here the attention to details, and there may not be a strong preaching message or a spiritual message, but this is just Sutta Goswami or Srila Vyasadeva engaging with the readers by providing details wherever possible. So here he gives an itinerary that these are the places through which he went, and at the end of the journey, he says that upagat shrantavaha, that with slightly tired horses, because of the long journey, Manak Vibhuha, Krishna arrives to Dwarka. So in the purport, Prabhupada mentions that the description of the cities in the route also lends credence to the existence of these kingdoms in the ancient times. So this is one place where you see theology is intersecting with the historians. So historically, these kingdoms are known to have existed, and now in the book of scriptures, we see the mention of the same kingdoms. So it basically lends factual credence to it. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that these are not in the order in which he traveled, but they are just mentioned there for the sake of reference. Two points that are of interest. One is that if you notice over here, as part of Krishna's traveling points, Sutta Goswami mentions Shaurasenan Sa Yamunan, that place on the bank of the river Yamuna, that is the part of the kingdom of Shurasen. And the acharyas say that this refers to Vrindavan. So, and there's later on a more, when there is this conversation by the ladies of Dwarka, there's a little bit more explanation on it. But these verses are often quoted to indicate that Krishna would often visit Vrindavan. So many times, not many times, the general belief is that when Krishna left Vrindavan, he never returned to Vrindavan. But there is also several acharyas, especially Vaishnava acharyas, who believe that Krishna would often return to Vrindavan. And this verse is quoted in that context. Prabhupada in the purport says that we are satisfied that the Lord has now reached his own province, Dwarkadham, from the Kuru province. Kurukshetra continues to exist since the Vedic time, and it is sheer foolishness when interpreters ignore or deny the existence of Kurukshetra. So Prabhupada is making the same point, that when the Bhagavatam is saying something that the historians are verifying, then it stands to reason that the other aspects of the Bhagavatam are also validated. Okay, next verse. Tatra tatra haya tartrera hari pradyutaranaha sayam vejadisam paschat gavisto gam gatastada. On his journey through these provinces, he was welcomed, worshipped, and given various presentations. In this way, in all places, the Lord suspended his journey by performing evening rites. This was regularly observed after sunset. So Prabhupada in the purport stresses that when we hear about Krishna performing his Sandhya Vandanam, then we should understand that this is God imitating humans, but it does not give the humans the license to imitate God. So one should not think that because Krishna is doing Sandhya Vandanam and we are also doing Sandhya Vandanam, so whatever Krishna does, we can do. There is a different reason, and Krishna mentions that, we have discussed that Krishna wants to set an example in his Prakrit Leela. Prabhupada in the purport says the Lord in human society does what is the duty of everyone, but sometimes he does something extraordinary and not to be imitated by the living beings. His acts of evening prayers, as stated herein, must be followed by the living being. But it is not possible to follow his mountain lifting or dancing with the gopis. One cannot imitate the sun, which can exhaust water even from a filthy place. The most powerful can do something which is all good, but our imitation of such acts will put us into endless difficulty. Therefore, in all actions, the experienced guide, the spiritual master, whose manifested mercy of the Lord should always be consulted, and the path of progress will be assured. Um, so, so this verse, there are few words that are also have more than one meaning. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he takes the last two meanings of the verse, and he says that tada actually means that he arrived, and shayam means in the evening, when Gavistha, when the sun had entered into Pascham Disha, into the western, in the western direction, Gam, in the ocean. So Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur interprets this verse as saying that this verse ends with Krishna arriving to Dwarka at the evening time, when the sun had set into the ocean. So slight difference in details. Jiva Goswami, he interprets it in a slightly more esoteric way, and he says that in the previous verse there was a mention of the Saurya Raj on the place on the bank of Yamuna in Saurya Raj. There was a mention of Vrindavan. In this verse, there is a mention of Gavistha, which also means the cowherd pastime. And Tada, he interprets as the killing of Dantavakra. And so he translates it as that Krishna, anxious for Gavistha, anxious for his cowherd pastimes, Tada, after killing Dhanvantara, Gamgata, went to Gokul. So in conjunction with the previous verse, he adds this verse to indicate that on his way to Dwarka, Krishna, remembering his cowherd pastimes, after killing Dantavakra, went to Gokul. So Dantavakra is understood to be the last demon that was killed by Krishna. After that, Krishna, he ended his demon killing pastimes. And then, of course, in a few years after that, or about 35 years after that, he ended his pastimes. But Dantavakra was a cousin of Krishna and a cousin of Shishupal also, and he was very angry at Krishna's killing of Shishupal. So he was waiting for Krishna. And Dantavakra is considered to be an incarnation of Vijay. And in terms of Anartha, is an incarnation of anger. So when Krishna extinguished him, then he actually went and enjoyed. He spent some time in Vrindavan and then resumed his journey and arrived to Dwarka. So this ends the 10th chapter. So we're a little before our half an hour mark, but because we've ended the chapter, I'll stop here and see if there's any questions. If not, then we can continue with the 11th chapter. So the 11th chapter is titled as Lord Krishna's entrance into Dwarka. And then, as I had mentioned last time, this chapter is mostly a manifestation of Krishna's, so it's a manifestation of the devotees' interaction with Krishna. Not so much Krishna's interaction with devotees, but devotees' interactions with Krishna. And we see that mood being built up in the previous chapters. So in the previous interactions, we see Krishna almost passive. When Arjun prayed to Krishna, Krishna gave him some brief instructions. When Uttara went for help with Krishna, Krishna helped her, but that was about it. I mean, not to minimize it, but that was the interaction. The prayers of Kunti Devi, Krishna responded with smiles. The several verses that Kunti Devi spoke, Krishna responded with a smile and moved on. Interactions with Maharaj Yudhishthir, again, Krishna was mostly passive. He took him to Bhishma Dev. Prayers by the ladies of Hastinapur, Krishna responded with a smile. He really didn't say anything. So all these chapters, they are emphasizing on how do devotees interact with Krishna. In the subsequent cantos, we will see more of how does Krishna interact with his devotees. In the 10th canto, we will see how does Krishna and the devotees interact with one another. So there we will see we'll see both the devotees interacting, Krishna responding, Krishna interacting, devotees responding. So in the 11th chapter, we again see a more of the same thing, but in a more intensified form. So which is why I had said that this is a good chapter to study rasas. And Dhanvir Maharaj, Dhanodhar Swami. And Dhanodhar Swami, he actually, at a few places, he comments. He comments on how these verses reflect the interplay of rasas. So let's begin with the study of the verses. And I think after the first verse, I'll give a brief introduction on how in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there's a description of the confluence of bhavs into rasas. So we'll begin with the first verse in the 11th chapter, first canto. Sutta vacha anarthan saupavrajya Shraddhanarjanapadan swakan dadamau dravakram tesham vishadam shamyamanneva. Sutta Goswami said, upon reaching the border of his most prosperous metropolis, known as the country of Anarthas, Dwarka, the Lord sounded his auspicious conch shell, heralding his arrival and apparently pacifying the dejection of the inhabitants. So the previous chapter ended with a description of the journey of Krishna from Hastinapur, or if you take Vishwanath Chakravarti's Thakur interpretation, it ended with Krishna reaching Dwarka when the sun was setting. Now this chapter begins with Krishna entering Dwarka. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, the beloved Lord was away from his own prosperous metropolis of Dwarka for a considerably long period because of the battle of Kurukshetra, and thus all the inhabitants were overcome with melancholia due to separation. So Krishna sounded his conch shell Panchajanya for two reasons. So one was to pacify them. And Prabhupada says that the sound of the conch shell is very auspicious. It is very encouraging, and Krishna sounded it to to pacify the dejection. However, if you notice, the word that is used to qualify pacifying is apparently, and the reason that is given is that uh, 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 the residents of Dwarka were used to seeing Krishna in person. So when they heard the sound of the conch, and the conches were unique to the person. So we also know in the Battle of Virat, when Arjun sounded his conch shell, then the army on the other side, even though they could not see the chariot, they knew immediately it was Arjun blowing his Devadatta. So each conch had a unique sound. So even though Krishna was far from Dwarka, but just by the sound of the conch, the residents knew that this is our Krishna who is coming. So they were pacified, but apparently pacified, because they were anxious to see Krishna. The second reason that is given is Krishna blowed the conch shell to increase the sense of anticipation. So Danudar Maharaj, when he comments on this verse, he says that the dejection of the residents is the highest ecstasy. It is an expression of love. They have different ratis towards Krishna, but under this vibhav, they transition to the anubhav. So Maharaj uses a lot of words that are technical. So I wanted to briefly describe to you this this process of building of rasas, and then the easiest way that I thought to so these are about 22 chapters of Nectar of Devotion, and then obviously we don't have the time to do it. So the easiest way I thought was to take an analogy, and we'll go through it and then understand it through that. So we'll use the analogy of a mother and a son. So the mother has a small son, and so again I'm stealing this from Danudar Maharaj. He uses it to explain it, and I found it to be very effective. So a mother has a small son, and she's very, very attached to him, and that attachment is the constant general mood of the mother. So that is known as sthai bhav. Sthai bhav is also known as rati, and this particular sthai bhav is in vatsalya. So we know there are 5 sthai bhavs, beginning from dasya going to madhurya. So the sthai bhav represents the constant steady state mood of the devotee. Now, while the mother is in the house, she happens to look upon the face of her child, and the child is smiling, and the mother is completely attracted to the smiling face. So the smiling face of the child is called vibhav. So vibhav is what is considered as an impetus, as the trigger. So it is something that acts upon the devotee, and it triggers to produce a certain result. So V means wherever it means concentrate. So it acts to concentrate. So in this case, the smiling face of the child is vibhav. It could result in one of 3 actions. So the mother, taken in by the smiling face of her son, she immediately bends down and she picks the son in an embrace. So that is called anubhav. So anu means to follow. So as a result of the vibhav, the anubhav is that the mother picks up the child. So the characteristic of anubhav is that it is voluntary, and it is an action. It is a verb. So the mother does something, which is she picks up the child and holds her in her arm, and she voluntarily does that. The second thing that might happen, or an alternate thing that might happen to the mother when she sees the smiling face of her child, is that milk may be coming from her breasts. So that is called sattvic bhav. So sattvic bhav, unlike anubhav, is involuntary. So anubhav was the mother consciously makes a decision to bend down and pick up the child. Sattvic bhav is that she has no control over it. It happens. So it is called sattvic because it is from the platform of the soul. It is sat. So we know there are ashta sattvic bhavs, like uh, tears falling from the eyes, hair standing at an end, horripilation, the skin shivering. So these are some things that nobody can can create. So somebody can't say that, okay, now my skin will start horripilating, or now my hair will stand on an end. But again, they are a result of the vibhav. They are the result of a trigger, and they are also actions. So they are involuntary actions. The third possible thing that might happen, and here we are going to embellish a little bit more, that when the mother looks at the son, the smiling face of the son, she sees that the son has a stone in her mouth, in his mouth. Now, what happens to the mother? So that love is eclipsed with concern. The love is eclipsed with fear. So the trigger is still the same, but the reaction is different, and that is known as vibhachari bhav. So vibhachari bhav, unlike anubhav and sattvic bhav, is not an action, but it is another emotion. And unlike sthai bhav, which is persistent, vibhachari bhav is transient. So as soon as the mother takes the stone out from the child's mouth, that is gone. The vibhachari bhav may also be different. So the mother's uh, 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 so when Yashoda Mai, who also has a Vatsalya Ras with Krishna, saw Krishna in the coils of Kaliya snake, and then she had all these emotions of fear, ghastliness. So these are different kind of emotions. They have nothing to do with love, but they are vibhachari. They come and they go. So we have talked about 5 bhavs. We have talked about sthai bhav, the steady state bhav, talked about vibhav, the trigger, talked about anubhav, the voluntary action that comes out of it. We have talked about sattvic bhav, the involuntary action, and the vibhachari bhav, the emotional reaction to it. So the last 3 could also be vibhavs, which means that they could in turn trigger off something else. So the anubhav, which is the mother picking up the child, may result in a sattvic bhav, which means that once the mother picks the child, then milk starts coming from her breast. Or the vibhachari bhav, which is the mother is fearful when she sees the stone in the child's mouth, may result in a anubhav, which means that she will rush and pick up the child and hold him close to her for protection. So this is the confluence of the bhavs, which is called rasa. So many times we say that a person is in sakhya ras or dasya ras. So that is a misuse of the word rasa. The rasa is actually it's something that is dynamic. it's like you're preparing a dish. You put a little bit of spices, a little bit of sabji, and then you get the dish out of it. So all these bhavs, they come together and they create a particular rasa. The rasa, it will have a certain flavor. The flavor is determined by the by the uh, by the sthai bhav. That if you're preparing something based on dal, then maybe it'll taste like dal. You may put a little bit of tomato or a little bit of sabji, but it'll be dal. If you're preparing something with milk, it'll be a milk preparation. You may put rice in it or something like that, but it'll be a milk preparation. So that's why in the Nectar of Devotion, the sthai bhav is called the emperor bhav, because everything else is under its purview. But the rasas change from moment to moment. What we call as rasas are actually ratis. So if somebody has a vatsalya bhav, then it's a vatsalya rati. If somebody has madhurya bhav, it's madhurya rati. It's not madhurya ras, because rasa is something that is dynamic, constantly changing, made out of the confluence of these 5 bhavs. Now, out of these 5 bhavs, the most attention is given to vibhav, which is the trigger. And so that part I'm not going to go into further details, but then there are several divisions and subdivisions and sub-subdivisions of vibhav. That what is it that excites one's bhav, the nature of the excitants, because ultimately that is the catalyst that starts the cauldron of rasa churning. So I'll stop over here for a few minutes and just see if we are all okay with this, and if there is any questions or comments.
So Prabhuji, you mentioned that this Shantaras, Vatsaras, these are like actually ratis. So why don't we call them as rati? Like why do we call them as rasas?
Not sure about it. It may be some translation, because if you look at Prabhupada's translation, Prabhupada translates rasas as mellows, and which is actually factual to what the definition is, that it's a particular mellow that one is experiencing at the time. These are moods. What is your mood? So there is that distinction there. Dhanudhar Maharaj also does not opine on why they are called, but he just says that that still, since they're commonly called rasas, you can also he himself calls them rasas also later on, and he says you should not be too much alarmed by it. Technically they are ratis, but people conventionally call them rasas. Just understand that rasa is something else.
Thank you, Prabhu. And is it possible to change the primary rasas? Like, is it our constitutional position? Like, we saw like Bhishma Pitama, like you mentioned a little bit when we were doing his prayers, that he changed his. His Ishtadev changed, right, from 400 Vishnu form to like the 200 form. So is that like, so basically that means that his rati must have also changed, right? Like, because if he is like in a dasya, obviously like in Vaikuntha it is mostly dasya ras. So from dasya it must have changed to like, I don't know, like Sakya or something like that. When his Ishtadev changed from 400 to 200 form.
So the changing of ratis and the change of the Siddha Pranali, kind of an esoteric topic. The general understanding is no. That the reason is called eternal means that it cannot be changed. But then at one point, somebody asked this question, not of Prabhupada, but from one of the sannyasis who was giving a class, that if the soul in the purified stage has the capability, one of the characteristics of the soul is that it can fulfill all its desires. So the question was, if it can fulfill all its desires, can a soul in Shantaras go to Madhurya Ras? And, part of the answer was that when you get there, you'll find out. And the other part was that in the material world, we tend to be very much into this competitive mood. This is better and this is worse. But actually, the bliss that is experienced by the soul in their Siddha Pranali is perfect for them. So they're not envious. So like the cows, they are in Shantaras. But when the cow sees Krishna's consorting with the gopis, they don't become envious of the gopis. So that mood of cooperation is very, very prominent there. So an impetus for change, at least in the way we understand, is when we try to get something that we are lacking. And that sense of fulfillment is there. That sense of lacking is absent over there. But overall, it's an esoteric subject. Generally, what we go is with Prabhupada's answer that it's eternal, it does not change. Regarding Bhishma, I would not completely agree with what you're saying, that his rasa changed or his rati changed. What the chapter says was that he saw Krishna in the four-armed form because of the Ishtadev mantra that he chanted. It does not say that it was a representation of his eternal rati. So he was chanting a Narayan mantra, he was meditating on Krishna in a four-armed form, but at the time of death, he was restored to his eternal mood.
And Prabhuji, like from the previous chapters, the last couple of verses from the previous chapter, it said that Krishna, he smiled at the ladies who were in Shantaras and Shringaras, and then he's like glanced at those. Yeah. So so basically, his reciprocation also changes based on the rati.
It does. Dhanudhar Maharaj gives this example of, this is more from the perspective of a devotee, but it still answers the question, that when a woman is walking down the street and she sees her son, so this is more in the conjunction of Vibhava Anubhava. So she sees her son, and then affectionately she pats the head of her son and embraces him. She walks a little bit further down the street and she sees a Brahmin or a renounced person, and then she gives obeisances. So the activities of the woman are commensurate to the relationship that she has. And Maharaj says that it would be very awkward if she started giving obeisances to her son and patting the head of the Brahmin. Because even though both of these actions, they represent the reciprocation of that woman in that relationship, but it is appropriate because it is consistent with the mood. So same thing we can understand from Krishna's perspective, that when Krishna sees his parents, he acts in a different way. When he sees the gopis, he acts in a different way. When he sees Arjun, he acts in a different way.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Here I will just, because I'm feeling little bit complex with my understanding, so I just share my understanding in 30 seconds and then I would ask a question, Prabhuji. There are total 5 bhavas are there: Sthayi bhav, Vibhav, Anubhav, Satvik bhav, and Vivachari bhav. So the Sthayi bhav is basically the constitutional bhav in which the soul is situated, like Dasya bhav to until Madhurya bhav. So generally what we say is Dasya rasa is not appropriate, as I understood. rasa is always a combination of 2-3 bhavs put together. That is called, we call rasa, and this is always dynamic, constantly changing.
Prabhu, just in the interest of time, I'm just going to ask you to fast forward to your question.
What is rati, Prabhu?
What is rati? So rati is, think of it as what we consider currently as our not currently, but what is considered as sthai bhav. So we have the pancha sthai bhavs, which is vatsalya, sakhya, etc. So in the nectar of devotion, it is said that rati is synonymous to sthai bhav, and they can be used interchangeably.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. I was just curious about Balaram. He's not in the picture. So, is there any mention about Balaram in all this context of Hastinapur and coming to Dwaraka, and where is he?
Does not appear at all.
And it doesn't also talk about the disappearance of Balaram. I know that there was some, I don't know whether it's Bhagavatam or some other text where it talks about the disappearance, where he takes the form of Anantashesh and he goes inside Yamuna and disappears. Is there any mention about Balaram?
Yeah, so I thought your question was in this particular chapter, the chapters like 9, 10, and 11. There's no mention of Lord Balaram here, but in the 10th canto, there's a lot of mention of Lord Balaram, including his disappearance pastime.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I don't know if we have time for question. I can wait until the end also.
It's related to what we just discussed?
Yeah, it's very quick because so the 5 relationships that we talk about, is it because it is in the mood of Vrindavan? I mean, we don't see that Krishna can be like a father. That relationship is not mentioned anywhere. So I think once I got the answer was that because all these 5 relationships are in relation to like how Krishna was in Vrindavan. I just wanted to confirm, or there's more explanation to that.
So I'm trying to understand your question. So you're saying that Krishna cannot be like a father because?
Like a fatherly figure, like having that fatherly relationship, because the 5 relationships are not like where you see Krishna as your father.
No, Dasya is like that, right? So when you're relating to Krishna in this mood of being a servant, then Krishna is your master. So master is like
that
a
would
father.
Be like father. Okay.
That's like a father figure. That's why they're and we'll see that in the prayers of residents of Dwarka, that the ones who relate to Krishna in that mood, they say, it's a paraphrase of that verse, but it's very close to that praise, Tumeva Mata Chapita Tumeva. So they actually address Krishna as, you're my father and mother, because they have that dasya bhav towards Krishna.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, a quick question. These, okay, rasa, vibhav and all that, it's unique to every individual, no? It's unique. There's no duplication.
So these are definitions, Prabhu. They are not unique to every individual. They are so they are the opposite, right? They are standard across everybody. So when you say vibhav, so what vibhav is defining is the impetus that acts on a person's sthai bhav. So everybody has vibhav, right? So it is standard. So think of these as definitions that are standard. What actually happens? So so a vibhav for a mother is seeing the face of her child. The vibhav for a pair, the vibhav for uh, of uh, of a woman would be in a more madhurya bhav, would be the embrace of her beloved. So in both the cases they are vibhav. But what actually populates that definition of vibhav can vary. It doesn't have to be unique, but it does not have to be the same. It can vary.
Okay, thank you, Guru.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, just a quick understanding. Like, I mean, is this only experienced in the purified stage, or is it possible to to experience it, or even not experience, but is like Vyabhichari bhav?
So that's a very good question. I was hoping nobody would ask it, because it was, to some extent, it is a little discouraging. But yes, the answer is it is only experience. See, because if you look at the basis of rasa, what is the basis of rasa? Sthai bhav, right? What is the basis of sthai bhav? Siddha pranali. So you cannot experience rasa unless you're aware of your eternal position. When are you aware of your eternal position? When you're in a perfected stage, right? So all these rasas are experienced in a perfected stage. It was very discouraging to me when I read it, because many times when we are in kirtans, we experience, or at least I used to, once in a while, I would experience this, this surge of emotion, and I would say, okay, Vyabhichari bhav, or something would happen, and I would say, okay, this is anubhav that's going on. I asked this question of Guru Maharaj once, and so the reason I asked him was that, and this was early on, we were studying all this, and there was another devotee that was very close to me. So when he would do kirtan, when he would sit in kirtans, he would cry, and then I would get very upset because I could not cry. And then every time I would look at him, and he would be crying and crying and crying, and I was very envious of him, that he's making all this progress, I am not making progress. So then out of that enviousness, I went to Maharaj and I said that this person is always crying, and is he making a lot of progress? And the Maharaj said that these are it's a symptom of a soft heart. These are sentimentalities, these are emotional reactions. If it happens, it's okay. If it does not happen, it's it does not me. I need to explain a little bit about this. So a lot of what we feel currently as rasa, it is a reflection of rasas, because the precondition to that is sthai bhav. Unless we are in a perfected stage, we will not be able to experience the rasas.
And in this from Shraddha to Prema, like when what at what stage is this rati can we experience?
Typically, it's considered after the stage of bhav. So when Nishtaruchi Ashakti happens, so at the stage of Ashakti, all the anarthas, or majority of the anarthas, are nivrit at that stage. At that stage, one gets a glimpse of their eternal possession.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will move on to the next verse, 111.2. Sauchakase dhaval dara dara apya urukramasya adhar sansonima dadama yamna karakan sampute yatabjakhane kalaham sautsvana. The white and fat bowl conch shell being gripped by the hand of Lord Krishna and sounded by him, appeared to be reddened by the touch of his transcendental lips. It seemed like a white swan was playing in the stems of red lotus flowers. So Krishna is called Urukramasya over here, which is referring to his. So Urukramasya is one who performs great activities, Urukrama. So he had come after a lot of adventures. He had participated in the 18-day battle of Mahabharata. He had reinstalled Maharaj Yudhishthir on the throne, and he had annihilated so many demons. So he's called Urukrama over here. And the verse, it's a poetic verse. So it describes the contrast of the white conch and with Krishna's hands and lips. So he says the white swan, Kalahamsa, playing with the stems of the red lotus flower, Abjakhanda. So this refers to the white swan is the conch, and the stems of the red lotus flower are the fingers of Krishna. So he is poetically describing the fingers of Krishna. They look like the stems of red lotus, and a white swan that is in between them. So Sutta Goswami says that after that he says that yatha. So he is saying as it is, to show that there is a analogy that he's conveying over here. So the second description is that the conch appeared reddened. So he says Shonima by the touch of his transcendental lips, Adharsana. And here Sutta uses the word api. So previously I had used yatha, and here he uses api. So he uses yatha to indicate that there he is drawing an analogy. Api means that here he is describing things factually. That the conch appeared reddened, in the sense the conch was actually reddened by the touch of Krishna's lotus lips. So how do we understand this? Why did the conch become red when Krishna touched it to his lips?
Because of shyness?
Why would the conch become shy?
Because the conch is conscious, no?
Yes, thank you. So Namapriya Mataji was right, but so you already assumed the consciousness and talked about the symptoms of consciousness. But Prabhupada makes the statement that everything in the spiritual world is chit. It is conscious. So the conch is conscious. And when it touches Krishna's lotus lips, then it acquires that, whether it is out of shyness or whether it is out of preeti or out of love or just out of the contact, it becomes reddish. And Prabhupada uses that too. He uses that also as a preaching point, that the jivas, because the conch is essentially a jiva, even though it's an eternal associate of Krishna, but it's a jiva. So similarly, Prabhupada says that when we come in contact with Krishna, we also acquire the characteristics of Krishna. We don't become Krishna, but when we are in contact with Krishna through the process of bhakti, then we also acquire the characteristics of Krishna. Prabhupada, he also draws from the initial metaphor about the lotus, the lotus and the fingers of Krishna and the conch. And Prabhupada says the Paramhansa, or the supreme the supremely intelligent person plays the part of a ducking swan in the water of spiritual bliss, eternally decorated by the lotus flower of the Lord's feet. So he's the first metaphor that Sutta Goswami says. Prabhupada draws that again to the contact between Jiva and Krishna. Okay, 111.3. Tam upashutyanindam jagadbhaya bhayavam pratyudya prajah sarva bhatrar darshan lalasaha. The citizens of Dwarka, having heard that sound which threatens fear personified in the material world, began to run towards him fast, just to have a long desired audience with the Lord, who is the protector of all devotees. So the citizens of Dwarka have heard the conch, and they recognize that conch as belonging to Krishna. So now they are running towards Krishna. So the verse describes two contradictory effects of the sound of the conch. So one is Jagat Bhaya Avaham, that it strikes fear in the heart of fear personified. And the second is Sarva Bhartar, that it gives protection to the devotees. So Prabhupada in the purport, he makes these 2 points. So the same sound, and Prabhupada often gives the example that when a policeman is going down the street, the citizens feel protected and the criminals feel threatened. So the sound of the conch, it's striking fear in the heart of fear personified, and it is giving simultaneous protection to the devotees. So what we see over here is the citizens of Dwarka hearing the conch and running towards the sound of the conch and running towards Krishna. So how do we understand this from the perspective of rasa? What is the vibhav over here?
The sound of conch is the vibhav.
The sound of the conch is the vibhav. And what is the running of the citizens of Dwarka?
Anubhav.
Why is it anubhav?
Because of the sound of conch, that is vibhav, because that triggered and they reacted by running.
True, but the reason is that so anubhav is something that is a conscious external action. So it's an activity that they voluntarily did. It was in reaction to the sound of the conch, but what they did was they voluntarily began to run towards Krishna. So this is in the category of what is known as Udipan Vishay Vibhav. And so now that all of you are rasacharyas, so all of you know everything about rasas, so I'll take you a little bit deeper into Vibhav, that there are two kinds of Vibhav. One is Alamban and the second is Udipan. And the difference between the two is that what is the trigger? So in the first case, Alamban, the trigger is the subject. In the second case, Udipan, the trigger is the object. So going back to our analogy, so when the mother sees the child, then it is Alamban, because the trigger is the child itself. But there may be another situation where the mother sees a toy that the child plays with, and that triggers all the same reactions. The child is not there, just the toy is there, but that it triggers all the reactions. So that is Udipan. So in this case, The reason it is called Udipan is because Krishna is not personally there. All that they're experiencing is something related to Krishna. So this is in the category of Udipan. So this is Udipan Vishaya Vibhav, and Anubhav is that they began to run towards Krishna. In the purport, Prabhupada also makes the point that some distinguished fiction writer in Bengal concluded that the Krishna of Vrindavan, that of Mathura and that of Dwarka were different personalities. Historically, there is no truth in this conclusion. The Krishna of Kurukshetra and the Krishna of Dwarka are one and the same personality. And he makes this point to emphasize that the devotees are all interacting with Krishna. So even though he does not say who the distinguished fiction writer is, but it is my understanding is he's talking about Rabindranath Tagore. I seem to remember him making this reference in some other lecture. I'm not 100% sure. So not very important, but the fact that he's making is important. That it's the same Krishna in Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka. And Jagat Bhayavam. So Prabhupada again in the purport, he says that the material existence is saturated with fear. And then he says the fear comes under 4 categories. Ahar nidra bhaya maithunam cha samyam etat pashubhi naranam. That he said ahar bhaya and ahar nidra bhaya maithunam cha. So this is a verse that Prabhupada quotes quite a bit. I don't know where it comes from, but it's obviously a Shruti from one of the Shruti Shastras. So that is the nature of material world. And then Prabhupada says that the sound of, just like the sound of conch drives away fear personified, the sound of Krishna's name, it drives away this ahar nidra vaya maithunam cha. So he says out of these 4 things, that the most basic is bhai. The most basic is fear. So out of fear of dying, you eat. Out of fear of exhaustion, you sleep. And out of fear of your lineage getting extinguished, you procreate. So the other fears, other activities that we do, which are characterizing this material world, are all coming from the platform of fear. And the sound of Krishna's holy name drives away that fear. Okay, so the next verse is a kind of a long verse, and 2 verses are combined actually. So I'll stop over here and see if there's any questions or comments.
Prabhuji, in the last lecture, you did mention something about rasa bhas, that we see some kind of like when we're doing the prayers, we saw some rasa bhas. I'm just trying to understand. Like now we know, about this rati and the secondary the rasas. So I'm just trying to relate that to this. Like where exactly did we see that again?
So that was that was apparent rasavas. What you're referring to is the preceding prayers by the ladies of Hastinapur was Aishwarya Bhav. And then all of a sudden we see them switch to Madhurya Bhav. They're saying that Krishna is the cause of the material creation, he destroys, he sustains. And then all of a sudden they're saying that Krishna is kissing his wives, The gopis faint at the thought of it. So that was the apparent Rasabhas. We reconcile it, or the Acharya reconcile it over there with the understanding that there were two different groups of gopis that were talking. And that is also reinforced later on when, at the end, when Krishna is leaving. Then you remember Krishna, he glances at the gopis and at the ladies in Shantaras, and he smiles at the one in Shringaras. So the understanding is that the gopis and Shantaras were talking more about the opulence of Krishna, and the gopis and Shringaras were talking more about the intimate pastimes of Krishna. Even if it is the same group that was talking, even then it is considered to be acceptable, because the interaction with Krishna is kind of like, it's like a plane taking off from a highway. So for a while the plane is running on the runway. I'm sorry, not highway, runway. When it's running on the runway, it's like running faster and faster and faster, but it's on the land, and then at some point it takes off. So that's the nature of the interaction, that earlier on, in almost all the prayers that we have seen, the earlier on, the mood is more of awe and reverence. And then it morphs into something else. We see Kunti Devi, initially she was glorifying him as the cause of all causes. And then she started talking about his Damodar pastime, about Yashoda and Devaki. That was her rasa there. So that way also it is understandable that they started off in this mood of acknowledging Krishna's position, and then they reverted more to their natural rati, which was Shringar. So both ways we can understand it.
Thank you, Prabhu. And another thing, like, when we're seeing these prayers of different devotees, we see how Krishna reciprocates with each of them in a different way. So when, like, in our life, if we have to understand, like, how is Krishna reciprocating with our prayers, or how do we understand? And I mean, one thing is, of course, we know that if our spiritual master is happy, or the devotees are happy, but is there any other way that we can know that Krishna is reciprocating or happy with our prayers?
It's a good question. This verse to some extent reveals that Krishna gives Abhaydan, that if you become less fearful of our material existence, that is a symptom of reciprocation of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada would say that if our detachment is increasing to the material conception, attachment to the spiritual conception, that is an experiential understanding of Krishna's reciprocation. And then these are all things that you as a devotee have experienced in your life. Maybe not to the extent that we would like it to, but we do experience that in our lives, that things that would have materially agitated us a lot more don't do so. And the reason is because of Abhaydan, because Krishna gives us this protection from fear. And then our attraction to spiritual activities, that this is Wednesday evening, you could be sleeping or preparing for Thursday's work program, but still you're sitting because there is some attraction there. So that's a symptom of Krishna's reciprocation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna, I think you gave this example one time, maybe not in this session. If we look at our fingernail, we don't, on a daily basis, we don't see them grow, but they are growing. Maybe
Yes,
after a month, we see that they grow. You gave that example one time.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. And that's that's why introspection is good for devotees. It's good for devotees that we may not see an effect on a day-to-day basis, but then we introspect and we say that if this situation had happened to me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, how would I have reacted? And then you can see the difference. So that is proof of Krishna's reciprocation. Thank you, Saran Prabhu.
Prabhuji, Sometimes, when we do some devotional service, you get the sense of joy. Definitely, we are still in modes, but there is a sense of joy because of Krishna's reciprocation. The immediate thought that sometimes come to me is like, if I can get this much, whether it is really possible, how the senior devotees and all, they could really, is it possible to contain what kind of ecstasy they would get is one question, and is it really possible to contain the joy they are getting? Is our bodies capable, or how does actually it looks incomprehensible? So if you share.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, we can only imagine it. We can't experience it, but we can imagine it. And to some extent, I guess the point you're making is that when we extrapolate, we do a little bit of service, we experience a little bit of joy. And then when you imagine devotees who have completely given their lives to the service of Krishna, then we can only imagine it. But yes, to some extent, we also see it, right? We see senior devotees who are going through so many material discomforts, diseases, um, you know, that affect the body, old age, and then they're still following through. Um, I remember Bhakti Tirth Maharaj in his very last days. He could not speak, and he could not hold a bead bag, but you could see his fingers moving. He was chanting. You could see he was moving his fingers, his thumb on his fingers. So we can just imagine, but it is something that encourages us also.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. We've seen that when Prabhupada was there in the planet, a lot of devotees were curious. They were asking Prabhupada what kind of rasa you were in the eternal pastime, and I also read a book about Gaur Govinda Maharaj, and there are a few chapters where his disciples are very curious about, or curious in the sense devotionally curious, not just trying to find out. So my question is around asking for experiences like this, different bhavs. I know my Guru Maharaj, Rompad Swami Maharaj, I think one of the lectures he mentioned about asking other of his god brothers about experiencing any rasas, but I don't remember the details. So what do you think, is that the right thing to ask a senior devotee about the rasas that he is experiencing? I know they may not reveal, depending on our qualification. We may be qualified to hear the experiences. Some devotees, they mentioned in their books the different experiences, but not very. It's not very prominent. It is hidden inside the book somewhere in the corner. Mostly because the majority of the readers may be not qualified to understand those rasas. So if you can talk about that a little bit, is it okay to ask about the experiences from senior devotees?
So if I understand your question, Prabhu, you're asking other people about their rasas, not about your rasa.
Yes, Prabhu. Not my rasa, not their experiences, senior devotees.
Yeah, that should be okay. You can always ask them. It's part of being inspired by devotees, especially senior devotees. What your experience is, what are your high points, low points in bhakti. some of Prabhupada's disciples asked, what, when they understood the terms like Siddha Swarup, Siddha Pranali, then they started asking Prabhupada about that. Prabhupada, of course, never gave an answer. He gave different answers. And one time he said that if I told you, you would faint. At another point, he said that does not concern you. In some of his lectures, he would say that a devotee's relationship with Krishna is like a wife's relationship with her husband. That a wife has intimate pastimes with her husband, but if she starts going around telling everybody about it, then it's a stigma on those pastimes. So the point he was making is that those who are aware of these ratis, they will not reveal it, and those who reveal it are not aware of it, because it's not something that is taken lightly. Prabhupada always went to great pains to suppress his ecstatic symptoms. Sometimes they would appear, but he would always try, and sometimes his voice would choke up and he would stop and he would say, "You do kirtan." And Rampur Maharaj shares of one time when Prabhupada was standing in front of the deities, and he saw tears coming from his eyes, but they were not falling down his cheeks. He said they were coming out horizontally, like from a syringe. I think Maharaj uses the term syringe. Like if you press the plunger of the syringe and the water comes out, it was coming out there. And there was actually a puddle of tears on the altar. But then Prabhupada gave up his senses and left and went to his room. So if you have a close, intimate relationship with a devotee, they will reveal it to you, perhaps to encourage it. It's definitely not something that is part of casual conversation. You go to a devotee and then you can ask about their experiences, but it's not generally something that is part of casual conversation.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, we have a few minutes. So if there are no more questions, we can end a little early. And next Monday, we'll start from 111.4. Thank you very much. Vancha kalpatarubhayaschet kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.